So I wanted to show the medical student how to look things up using Google Scholar, so you can look up the actual literature. When you hear crazy claims like that, you can look at the literature and see, is there any evidence to support it? Many items that come to bear that are out there that claim to have all these health benefits, turned out they have very little support in the literature that they actually work. Sometimes it's the opposite. Now, there are a few things out there that you can go to the health store and get that have absolutely no benefit that we can see. To my shock, every claim turned out to have a basis in actual research. So it really, I was very impressed. Chokeberries have been in Michigan for quite a while. When my mother grew up on a farm, her and her brothers, they were chokeberries all through the woods there here in Michigan, and so they've been known, but people didn't eat them because they're called chokeberries for a reason. There's no sugar in them. And so as a result, it's not one of the, you can make a pie if you add sugar and stuff, to them, but compared to blueberries or elderberries or other things in the berry family, they didn't get a lot of attention because they're not very sweet. Turns out, though, that the things that make blueberries valuable are present in chokeberries times 4 to 10. And that's what makes them impressive, is that chokeberries, or aronia, it's the other name for them, they have tremendous biochemical properties. Before I was an MD, I got my PhD in experimental pathology. My doctoral minors are clinical biochemistry and pharmacology. And so I found the literature very fascinating. Now what I'm going to do is to go through essentially the literature on the use of chokeberries in many disease processes. Most of these studies that you're going to see are in animal models, and so I can't guarantee that all this stuff is going to translate into humans. However, as mammals, we have a lot in common with mice and rats and other animals, and so you kind of extrapolate from there. Some of this stuff is demonstrated in petri dishes even, and so we don't have a lot of human trials for many of the things that I'm going to be bringing up. Why is that? Well, when you have a drug that you have a patent on, that's how you make your money. Okay, you can sell it and got your patent and you can make a whole lot of money. When you're talking about a natural product, you're not going to make billions of dollars selling something that grows, something in nature. Okay? So you're not going to see double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, the type of trials that you see in drug trials. You're not going to see those for anything natural. And so what we have to do is we have to take advantage of smaller studies and look for efficacy in those smaller studies, because that's all you're going to get when it comes to natural agents. And then you can basically sum up the smaller studies into something we call meta-analyses. And these are also found in review articles, and that shows you, okay, based on all of the smaller studies that have been done, what is the consensus? And so we're going to be talking about a number of small studies here looking at chokeberries. And I can even talk a little bit about my own experience with it. I have been recommending it for quite a few things since I was so impressed with the literature, I put together a presentation that I have online. It's about 90 minutes long, so it's going to be longer than this presentation, called the same thing, The Potential and Real Benefits of Chokeberries. So this is the abbreviated version of that program. So if you want to know more, I'll refer you to that one. Okay? So very impressed with it. I've been recommending it for a number of things. I had a friend of mine, I still have a friend, okay. His wife is suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. She's in her late 60s, and for many years she suffered from very, very bad chronic fatigue. And in chronic fatigue syndrome, it's kind of an immune disorder almost, to where one of the theories is that your body is busy, it's a hyperinflammatory state. And so your body is busy making stress molecules as opposed to energy molecules. And so these individuals, they run out of energy very quickly. Now, Joyce, the woman's name, she was running out of energy by 3 in the afternoon. She was done. I mean, she would get home from work barely and right to bed. And that was her way. So I said, well, let's try, I gave her some. I said, let's try chokeberry juice. Just what do you have to lose, and see what happens. My thinking was, okay, chokeberry juice is anti-inflammatory, okay, and it's antioxidant. And those are things I'm going to be seeing a lot through this program. And if this is a hyperinflammatory condition, then by reducing inflammation, maybe that will allow her body to start making some energy molecules, ATP, NADPH, and so forth, and let's see if it makes a difference. Well, she didn't contact me for a couple weeks after she started it, because at first she said she noticed a difference right away, but she didn't want to say anything just because it was a temporary effect. And so about 3 weeks later, she contacted me and says, it is made, I take 4 ounces every morning, and I notice a big difference. Now, when I take it, and she was only taking it in the morning, she says that before she would be all petered out by about 3 in the afternoon, now she's going till around 5 or 6. And so I told her, well, let's try taking it twice a day and see what happens. And so that's where we're at right now. But she was pretty impressed with that. Now again, I'm not saying that it's FDA approved for chronic fatigue, but in this particular single case, I was impressed so far with what I've seen. Okay? So let me get going here. All right, oxidative damage. Oxidation is something that occurs from living and from aging. The older we get, the more we pick up oxidative damage. Now, oxidation is the process by which these cars turn into rust, and it's also the process by which our skin loses elasticity and our body's ability to repair itself goes down. That's part of the aging process, and it's called oxidation. It's not our friend. Okay, the more oxidation, the more damage. We have our bodies, just by oxygen is very toxic. People think of oxygen as very good, and we need oxygen. Obviously, oxygen is very important for our bodies to be able to burn calories and to have energy. You can't do that without oxygen. However, when oxygen breaks down, something called superoxide radical is very, very toxic. It's extremely poisonous. And so we have these enzymes in our bodies that are specifically designed to reduce oxidation. And if they don't do their job, we decline and fall apart very rapidly. And so to have things with antioxidant properties is very important. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've been recommending blueberries for many years. As a psychiatrist, blueberries are a brain fruit. Blueberries have polyphenols, and polyphenols have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Blueberries increase something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's a hormone-like substance produced by the helper cells in our brain, the glial cells. And BDNF helps our brain tremendously. It helps our brain cells make more brain cells, and it extends the number of synapses per neuron and enhances the lifespan of the brain cells. So very important. Blueberries increase that. So blueberries reduce oxidative stress and promote healthy brain function. And I've been recommending them for years, saying, okay, when I put people on medication and so forth, I will recommend, why don't you get in the habit, every time you go to the grocery store, get yourself some blueberries, snack on blueberries, they're good for your brain. Okay? So, lots of things. Blueberries are very helpful. Now, it turns out, chokeberries, of all of the, blueberries and elderberries, strawberries, goji berries, these berries are called superberries because they contain these polyphenols which help slow the aging process, good for your brain, and so forth. Now, the reason I would consider chokeberries the Superman of the superberry family is because of the amount of polyphenols present in chokeberries compared to the other berries. All right? Chokeberries. Now, depends on where you grow the chokeberry and the specific strains. You can have, at the low end, 4 times as many polyphenols as blueberries, and blueberries are like in second place, by the way. So there's only one berry that is head and tail above blueberries, and that's chokeberries. Now, at the low end, chokeberries are 4 times. They contain 4 times as many polyphenols as blueberries. At the upper end, 10 times, depending on where you get the chokeberries from. So quite a bit there. So chokeberries, again, are the Superman of the superberry family. Now, there are many, many chemicals in chokeberries, and I'm not about to go through all of them. But polyphenols, anthocyanins, epicatechin, those are the big players. Okay? Mostly the polyphenols, though. All right? Chokeberries, this is well, I forgot what paper I got this from, but here's the paragraph. It says, chokeberries have one of the highest in vitro antioxidant activities among fruits. The mechanisms of the in vivo antioxidant activity of their phenolics after absorption spread out far beyond radical scavenging and include suppressing the formation of reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, inhibition of proaxidant, and restoration of antioxidant enzymes. and so forth. Bottom line is that chokeberries, it says they have one of the highest antioxidant. Now, my question is, I don't know, and I've looked throughout the literature, I don't know of any fruit with higher antioxidant activity than chokeberries. None. I don't know of any fruit that beats it. None. I've looked and looked. And so where they get one of the highest, I don't know why they say one of the highest. As far as I know, it is the highest. Now, there are other things that have more polyphenols. Okay, if you take a look at cloves, cloves are off the chart. Cloves are huge. They have a lot. But cloves don't have a lot of other things. But among berries, chokeberries are number one. Unless there's some obscure fruit that I haven't heard of. Okay? Now, there's a number of papers that have actually gone and measured the amount of polyphenol in various berries, in chokeberries. And according to this particular paper in Food Technology and Biotechnology, they measured it at 1,500 to 5,300 milligrams per 100 grams dry weight. So 1,500 to 5,300 milligrams. And again, that's going to vary from where you get your fruit. Now, this is another one where they looked at it, and it was like 2,000 per 100 milligrams. And if you take a look at the Aronia from Bulgaria, the juice is of almost 5,000 milligrams per liter. Now, where this is significant is this. Okay, keep in mind, all right, they're listing the berries and their polyphenols. So here, this is kind of at the low end even, at 2080, so 2080 to 5,000 here, all right, per 100 grams. What's the next one down here? We've got bilberries, blackberries, blueberries, black currants, and so forth. And so what you notice is that blueberries are sitting at around 525 milligrams per 100 gram dry weight. 525. And where are our chokeberries? At 2,080. So this is 4 times what you see in blueberries, and blueberries are like in second place. So 4 times. This is quite a lead. This is quite a lead. Your horse is 4 times closer to the finish line than the next horse. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. So pretty impressive. So you get the same dose of polyphenols in 1 chokeberry, you have to consume at least 4 blueberries. So that's where this comes in handy. If you're trying to give yourself, if you're trying to supplement your diet and give yourself polyphenols because you want to slow the aging process, then you can use blueberries, but you're going to need a lot more. You're going to need a lot more. And I take a lot of natural things in the morning, and less is better. If I don't have to take a whole lot of something, that's awesome. And so, again, that's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards chokeberries, and I adopted it so quickly because I don't have to take as much juice to get the same effect. I don't have to drink 16 ounces. Okay? All right. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the effect on memory. Right? Now, there's animal studies that really are very impressive in showing chokeberry has a positive effect on memory. Now, in these studies, this particular study was published in 2016 called Cognitive Enhancing Effect of Aronia melanocarpia. That's what you call, that's the Latin name for the chokeberry. Extract against memory impairment induced by scopolamine. So let me explain the basis of this study. All right. You can measure how intelligent a mouse is by how quickly it can solve a maze. What you do is you put cheese at the end, you put the mouse in the maze, and you time. How long is it going to take this mouse to find that cheese? Okay? That's what you do. Now, we can't really, mice don't get Alzheimer's. They just don't live that long. We don't have Alzheimer's mice. So we have to simulate Alzheimer's. What do you do there? You give them scopolamine. Scopolamine, it blocks their cholinergic receptors. Acetylcholine is something in your brain that improves your memory, that you need acetylcholine and acetylcholine receptor activation in order to have normal functioning memory. Okay? So when you give them scopolamine, you block those cholinergic receptors and you make the mouse stupid. So now when they try to go through the maze, they are slow. They have a hard time finding that cheese because they're like, what cheese? Where'd it go? I don't know. They can't remember. Okay, and so they have a hard time. However, if they gave them the scopolamine and made them stupid, and then gave them chokeberry juice, it overrode the stupefying effects of the scopolamine. It restored their memory. Okay? Now, how does that work? How does chokeberry juice improve their memory? Now, first of all, is the use of scopolamine a good model for feigning Alzheimer's? Actually, it is. And the reason is this. All right. In Alzheimer's disease, what you see is a preferential loss of cholinergic neurons in the brain. So, of the neurons in the brain, the ones most susceptible to dying off in Alzheimer's are those neurons that use acetylcholine. Okay? So when you give scopolamine, you pretend that's what happens. Okay? The loss of cholinergic neurons impairs memory. Now, there is an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, and this enzyme breaks down acetylcholine. So if this is really, really active, then you're going to have low acetylcholine in your brain, and you're not going to have a very good memory, because this lowers acetylcholine. Now, there is a medicine that we have called Aricept, and Aricept blocks that enzyme, and it raises acetylcholine levels, and that's one of the mechanisms by which it helps people with Alzheimer's. So we use that very commonly with Alzheimer's because it blocks acetylcholinesterase. Now, there's another thing you need to be aware of, and that is, I mentioned earlier, BDNF. It stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that, as I mentioned, is a hormone-like substance produced by the cells in the brain called the glial cells. And the more BDNF, the happier your brain cells are. Okay, BDNF is very important for healthy, strong memories. BDNF is important for the prevention of dementia. It keeps your nerve cells alive longer so that your nerve cells in your brain can live their full lifespan. If you don't have enough BDNF, your brain cells die prematurely. They will not make it. So let's say you've been blessed. You know, some people have these Methuselah genes that make it very likely that you're going to live to 100. Many people have those genes. However, if they've had a life of stress, exposed themselves to toxic things like alcohol, so forth and so on, then they run out of brain cells before their bodies die. And we have nursing homes for people like that. Because their bodies are alive, the brain cells didn't make it. And so they're not there. Their bodies are there, but they're not there. And that's because their brain cells died before their bodies did. BDNF helps keep those brain cells alive. All right? Now, think about when you're looking at a neuron, think of just like we have an octopus here. Octopus has 8 legs, all right? Healthy octopus does. Unhealthy octopus has less, okay? Now, brain cells, a healthy brain cell, when you talk about synaptic connections, those are like the legs on your octopus. A healthy brain cell has about 10,000 synapses per neuron. About 10,000 per neuron. An unhealthy brain cell, closer to 5,000. And the brain has there's something called neuroplasticity. This number can change. There are many modifying factors that can cause you to go from 5 to 10 and 10 to 5. Okay? BDNF helps the brain cell stay closer to 10,000. Okay? So as I mentioned, 5,000 on the low end, 10,000 on the high end, and BDNF promotes the 10,000. Now, let's call BDNF-induced arborization. When you think of arbor, means trees or branches. And so here, you see a nerve cell without brain-derived neurotrophic factor. When brain-derived neurotrophic factor is added, we've got about 50 more legs here. Okay, it causes more synapses. So there we have BDNF causing increased synaptogenesis. Okay? Now, in addition to synaptogenesis, it has anti-apoptotic activity. BDNF, what you need to know, what does anti-apoptotic activity mean? It prevents the cell from dying prematurely. Okay, that's it. It blocks the cell. It blocks the nerve from dying prematurely. That's the second thing. And the next thing that BDNF does is it causes protoneurons to turn into true neurons. So it actually makes more neurons. There are certain parts of your brain where you continue to make new brain cells. So brain-derived neurotrophic factor does 3 things. It increases the number of synapses per neuron. It reduces the rate at which your neurons die. It helps prevent neuron death. And it increases the production of new brain cells. That's why BDNF is very important. And it turns out that chokeberry juice actually increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor in your brain, just like blueberries, but chokeberry to a greater degree. Now here's Aricept, that anti-dementia medication, and we're measuring how this drug blocks acetylcholinesterase. And what you see here is that the active ingredient in chokeberry juice is just about as effective as this medication for blocking that enzyme acetylcholinesterase. Okay? So it has a medication-like effect on the brain in terms of dementia. Okay? So very promising study here. Okay? All right, now it also has, because it has all of these polyphenols have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. As a result, the effects that it has on your organs are impressive. So we have evidence from a number of studies that it protects your liver, hence hepatoprotective, it protects your stomach, gastroprotective, and generalized anti-inflammatory effects. And so aronia, or chokeberries, have very many health benefits for your entire body because of that. And we're going to spend some time talking about some of these. There's evidence that it helps to reduce blood pressure as well. Okay? Now, I wouldn't throw away my blood pressure medication, but I would recommend augmenting for further support for lowering blood pressure medicine so that maybe a patient might not need as much. And there are a number of reasons for that. Okay? Also, with heavy metal damage does tend to cause more oxidative damage to one's body. And so individuals or animals that have been exposed to cadmium, a heavy metal, if you gave them chokeberry juice, it helped to undo some of the damage from the heavy metal toxicity. So lots of things here. Obesity, even it has shown evidence in mice that it has anti-obesity effects in mice. So now there are reasons for that, and I can't go into all of it because it's very complicated. But these diseases, one of the things all of these diseases have in common is that at their very core, oxidation and inflammation play a huge role in all of these diseases. And so by helping to reduce both oxidation and inflammation, that's the mechanism by which these polyphenols help the patient. Okay? Now, what dose do we use? Because if you look at those animal models, they'll say we use so many milligrams per kilogram. And if you do a direct comparison, the dose is so high, there's no way any human's going to be able to consume those doses. And you can't do that. There is a formula, and this is the formula up here, a formula to translate, to go from animal dose to human dose. And so in many of those studies, I did the calculations here, and so to take the human dose that they were using in the animal doses, you need about 2,592 milligrams if you weigh 175. If you weigh 175 pounds, it's about 2952, or that comes out to about 2.5 ounces of chokeberry juices twice a day, okay, to give you some of the doses that were used in these clinical trials, just in the general ballpark, because they use different doses in different studies, obviously. Okay? All right, that's a question that comes up quite a bit. All right? All right, now atherosclerosis. What is atherosclerosis? Hardening of the arteries. That's the aging process. That really plays a big role in the age. As we get older, inflammation is the engine that pushes atherosclerosis. What happens on the inside of our blood vessels, inflammation gets started, and when that happens, you develop an atheroma, or a lump inside the blood vessel, and it gets thicker and thicker, and as it does that, it blocks circulation, and you end up with poor circulation. Okay? And as we age, that continues. And so the small capillaries that feed your skin, when you lose those capillaries, then you're not able to get good blood flow, and so your ability to repair elastin, the connective tissue in your skin that gives it its bounciness, we lose that as atherosclerosis progresses, resulting in wrinkling of skin and aging of our organs. That's atherosclerosis. And it starts with oxidative stress. And so we have enzymes to help reduce that oxidative stress. Superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione reductase. those are enzymes. If we have a lot of those enzymes, those protect us from aging. Those protect us from premature death. And if you didn't have those, you'd be dead in a week. Okay, people with progeria, ever seen those kids on Oprah who have progeria, and at 12 they look like they're 70? Okay, they have problems with these enzymes, and your body just ages. That's what happens. And so those enzymes keep us young. And those reactive oxygen species, those are oxidative things that age us, that make us sick. And so we need the antioxidants to protect us from all that, to prevent atherosclerosis and plaque formation. All right? And again, if there is a mutation in those enzymes and they don't work, then you are prone to all sorts of diseases that shorten our lives. Okay? And polyphenols, what do? They help to replenish these enzymes that keep us alive. So when we consume polyphenols from whatever source, it helps keep these guys able to do their job so that they do it better and more completely and protect us from the oxidative damage. Just by breathing air, it's causing oxidation. Just normal living causes oxidation and accelerates dying. Living causes dying, okay? And the more oxidation, the faster we die. And so when we consume polyphenols and other antioxidant compounds, it slows this process. These glutathione reductase, catalase, superoxide, especially superoxide dismutase. This is the most active enzyme known to man. And if it stops doing its job, you're a goner, because it protects us from the poisonous effects of oxygen. Okay? So you want to keep that going. And part of obesity, the more obese we are, the more oxidation and inflammation throughout our body. That's why obesity is dangerous. That's why it's bad. One of the reasons it's bad for us. It increases oxidative stress and increases inflammation, which causes insulin resistance, which means low energy, you're hungry all the time, tired, can't get enough rest, okay? And the food that we eat, instead of the energy going into our nerve cells and our muscles, it all goes to fat. And the reason is because inflammation inhibits the effect of insulin, okay? So insulin can't do its job. And so we just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And oxidation and inflammation causes that. And so, again, if you have something that has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, guess what? It helps to undo that process. Hence, the anti-obesity effects. Now, this inflammation and oxidation also is behind hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes, atherosclerosis, even cancer. Even cancer. Now, we didn't know this. When I was in medical school, we did not know that behind all of these diseases, we saw them as completely separate. We didn't know at that time that inflammation and oxidation were the culprit behind all of these guys. Okay? So these natural foods, these super berries, by consuming those, were helping to helping to reduce the risk of a host of disease processes. Okay, and I mentioned, I'm not going to go into all this, but just atherosclerosis, where your foam cells get oxidized, low-density lipoprotein go inside your macrophages, your foam cells, causing these lumps inside our blood vessels, increasing blood pressure and putting us at risk for all kinds of other problems there. All right. So chronic disease, again, when you have something that has high amounts of polyphenols, it helps to reduce the risk of chronic disease because of its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Now, most of these polyphenols are flavonols, flavones, flavonones, flavanol, isoflavone, anthocyanin. These are the active things that are doing the work in terms of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. Now, the catechins, especially epicatechin. This is a very important one because epicatechin turns out to have remarkable effects at improving stamina. Okay, when you give mice epicatechin, it very much improves their endurance through a number of mechanisms. All right. What it does is it increases skeletal muscle capillarity. So what that means is that epicatogen increases the density of blood vessels in your skeletal muscle. Okay? It also increases the production of mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. The more mitochondria, the more calories your muscles burn. The longer you can go, the more endurance. And that's what epicatogen does. And chokeberries, that's one of the polyphenols that are present in chokeberries, are epicatogen. So the distance, if you put these mice on treadmills and given them epicatogen, their endurance was increased 84%. Okay? So very, very useful. All right. And in terms of, there is some evidence that it does help with the treatment of cancers. It has anti-proliferative effects. What that means is that it helps slow down cancer cell growth. And we do have some studies in animals showing that if you use the chokeberry extract along with the chemotherapy worked much better. And that my brother has a kind of cancer right now, and it's kind of an experiment that we're running because he's going to have surgery. If the tumor gets too large, when they do the surgery, half his face can be paralyzed. And so giving him the chokeberry juice, hoping it can keep the tumor size down so that when they do the surgery, he might get out of it without having a paralyzed face. I don't know what's going to happen. There are no studies because right now this is kind of still new stuff. We don't have any studies looking at every form of cancer. We don't know what the impact is for all of these different cancers. We know that in some cases it seems to be helpful. All right? So it's a trial and error thing right now. But we do have some evidence. Certainly in vitro, we do see that it does have anti-cancer effect. What that means, if you take a cancer cell line growing in a petri dish and you add extract of chokeberry, it does inhibit the growth of the cancer. Now, whether that will play out in actual cancer, we'll see. We'll see. Okay? But that's the state of the art right now. Here we see in liver cancer cells in vitro, and what we notice here is blueberry polyphenols do inhibit cancer growth. Blueberry polyphenols. However, chokeberries does it at lower doses, so you don't need it as much. And so those polyphenols are very important. In the Western world, we have quite a bit of cancer here. But think about it. We have so many. It's hard to know what caused the cancer because we're exposed to so many unnatural things in this environment. I mean, there's so many. We don't know what do you point to? Because look at our food. Look at all the preservatives and everything going on. We don't know what causes what. And so the idea here is you look at the effect of polyphenols. Polyphenols do have some anti-cancer properties, so it stands to reason that if you have a diet that is richer in natural foods and berries, chokeberries, things like that, that it should affect the risk. And we know that people who eat lots of processed food have a higher, and people who eat berries and nuts and natural things have a lower risk of things. And maybe this is one of the reasons why, because these polyphenols and the natural things we're eating have an effect on cancer cell lines. All right, so the thing is that many things go into the promotion of cancer cells. It's called when a cell goes from normal to cancerous. That there are several things. Obesity contributes to that, because remember, obesity and inflammation go together. The more obesity, the higher your general inflammation. There's a whole thing. There's a reason for that I'm not going to go into, but just that is a thing. That is real. Oxidative stress. The more oxidation, the greater risk of cancer. The more inflammation, the greater risk of cancer. And so all of these things promote the development and growth of cancer cell lines. All right, so the higher oxidative stress, the higher inflammation, the higher the risk of cancer here. And so, as I mentioned earlier, what do those berries do is that they reduce inflammation and oxidation. And so overall, there is very good evidence that this should indeed lower one's risk for the development of neoplasia. Again, in humans, we don't have human studies to prove this. Okay, it makes sense on paper, based on what we know from the animal studies and in vitro studies. Okay? So polyphenols arrest cancer cell growth and proliferation by many different mechanisms. It would take about 3 hours to go into all of the mechanisms by which the polyphenols found in chokeberries could be helpful for preventing cancer cell line. Okay? This is the study. This paper here is entitled "Cytotoxicity of Gemcitabine Enhanced by Polyphenolics from Aronia melanocarpa in Pancreatic Cancer Cell Line (ASPC1). So what they did here is this was pancreatic cancer growing in a petri dish, and what they did was they exposed it to this chemotherapeutic agent called gemcitabine. And what they discovered is that yes, it did kill the pancreatic cancer cells, but when the extract of chokeberry was added, it killed it much better. Okay, it was more effective at killing the cancer line. Okay, so there we go. Now, autoimmune disorders. This is very important because we have a lot in Michigan. Living in Michigan, everybody here is at higher risk for autoimmune disorders than any other state except maybe Alaska. Okay, why is our risk so high? Why are we number one for multiple sclerosis? Number one. Number one. We're number one in multiple sclerosis. Why is that? Well, we believe that it's partly related to low vitamin D levels. Okay, vitamin D is important for the functioning of the CD8 T cells. And those cells are involved in autoimmune disorders, okay? Now, why is that? Why? Because, yeah, we're north, but, so is New York, so is Wisconsin, and all these other states. Why are we number one? It's not just because we're a northern state, but we are a peninsula, surrounded on three sides by water. As a result, that water vapor goes into the upper atmosphere and it blocks ultraviolet light, and that UV light and that sunshine hits your skin and it makes vitamin D. And so we don't get as much. We don't get as much. And so people in Michigan have low vitamin D and are therefore very at risk for all autoimmune disorders. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, all that stuff. We're at risk for that, okay? Because of the sun issue, because of the low vitamin D issue. Now, aronia berry supplementation has anti-inflammatory effects, and I mentioned that earlier. It lowers inflammation, and when you have an autoimmune disorder, your body is in a hyper-inflammatory state, and this helps to reduce that. So the likelihood of an exacerbation is much higher if your blood is hyper-inflammatory. So aronia makes your blood less inflammatory, okay? To help keep that excitation under control. It inhibits tumor necrosis factor alpha, for one thing. Now that's a big deal. A lot of these very expensive drugs, you see these people come on, you'll see commercials for psoriasis, for rheumatoid arthritis, and they talk about these drugs. Look how great your life is if you take this pill. Those pills are expensive, okay? I mean, you're talking about these medications are like $50,000 a year and up, some of them, okay? And some of them, that's what they do. They inhibit tumor necrosis factor alpha. Now, so that, isn't that great to take that little pill? Well, I have rheumatoid arthritis and I won't take those medicines. And the reason that I refuse to take them is because what you give up is protection from cancer. Tumor necrosis factor alpha and other interleukins, they protect you from cancer. And so when you take those medicines and you block that, your risk of many cancers goes up significantly. All right? Now, when you have aronia berry or other polyphenols like that, that reduce your risk that helps reduce inflammation, and by blocking TNF-alpha, it does it in a natural way so that there is no associated, as far as we know, no associated risk of getting cancer. Okay, and so again, if you can do something naturally, the benefits are very high with much less side effects. Okay, but again, nobody's really looked at it long term because this isn't a drug that's gone through FDA approval. But I would be surprised, I would just be very surprised if berry extract increased your risk of cancer, because we already saw evidence that it actually reduced the risk of cancer, okay, in many ways. All right, now lastly we're talking about mood disorders. I'm a psychiatrist, and so that's something that I'm very concerned with, is mood disorders. Half my patients have depression, anxiety, and all kinds, hearing voices and all kinds of things, substance abuse, all kinds of things, all right? And so I want to know, what effect does it have on mood disorders? Well, in animal models, specifically in rats, it does seem to reduce both anxiety and depression. Now, why might it do that? Why might it reduce anxiety and depression? Well, for one thing, it has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. It blocks monoamine oxidase. Okay, now why might that help your mood? Well, one of the first antidepressants that came out was a class called monoamine oxidase inhibitors. And these enzymes break down something called dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. These are monoamines, okay? And these are very much involved in your mood. And serotonin. What does serotonin do? Well, low serotonin is found in individuals who have depression, irritability, anxiety. Okay, serotonin. If you have really low serotonin, you get obsessive compulsive tendencies. You just can't let things go. You're bothered by things before everybody else is. And they just can't seem to let things go. They ruminate and ruminate. That's low serotonin levels. Monoamine oxidase is an enzyme that breaks serotonin down. Now, dopamine is the neurotransmitter of pleasure. When dopamine levels are high, you're able to enjoy things. You're motivated. And norepinephrine is for alertness, okay, and so forth. And so these things are very important for regulating your brain. And so by blocking monoamine oxidase, by blocking that, you increase the number of these monoamines, and so mood is enhanced as if you were taking a medication. Okay, so this is a natural anti-anxiety, antidepressant. Now, oxidation and inflammation are also involved in mood. The more depressed you are, the higher inflammation. So inflammation causes you to feel depressed. Depression causes inflammation. And so you get stuck in a positive feedback loop. You notice how if you have the flu, you feel horrible, you have no motivation, you just feel yucky, you don't want to do anything, you're not motivated? That's inflammation. That's interleukin 6. That's part of inflammation. Inflammation makes you depressed and unmotivated. And the more inflamed you are, the more depressed and unmotivated. But if you're depressed, that also increases inflammation. So again, really nasty positive feedback loop. Okay, it knocks out everything, motivation and everything. Okay? So, depression increases inflammation. Inflammation reduces dopamine in your reward circuits. Now, why might that be? Why is it that when you're inflamed, your reward circuits go offline? It goes like this. Your body, if you have inflammation, your body assumes you've been injured, okay, or you're sick, something's wrong. You've been taken over by a microorganism and you need to kill it and get it out of your system, or you've been injured. So should you be having fun? No! And so it blocks your ability to look forward to things or enjoy things because you're supposed to be healing. Okay? So that's why inflammation makes your mood depressed, because that's your body's way of saying, stop wiggling, stop moving around, stop having fun, just heal. So that tries to explain why the dopamine in your reward circuits goes offline if you have inflammation. Okay? So, there's notable benefit to consuming chokeberries to reduce the risk of a myriad of disease processes and to slow the ravages of the aging process. So, hypertension, atherosclerosis, diabetes, obesity, autoimmune disorders, cancer, macular degeneration, I didn't mention that, that's in the longer program, dementia, and mood disorders. All of these things, we have evidence that consumption of chokeberries, the polyphenols, the massive amounts of polyphenols that you have in chokeberries, seem to have benefit in all of these. Okay? So that's the reason that I put together the program, because chokeberries deserves the title, the Superman of the superberry family. It is for that reason. It's basically about, we know that polyphenols are beneficial. We have lots of evidence that they are. And from what we see in the animal studies that we have so far, and from some anecdotal evidence from what we see in the clinical practice, it's very, very useful. I mean, if you ask your average psychiatrist, are blueberries good for you? The correct answer is yes. They have a long record of knowing the benefits of blueberries for your brain. And what I'm saying now is that chokeberries have all of those benefits and then some, 4 to 10 times the potency that we see with the blueberries. Okay, So that's why I recommend chokeberry juice. It's the non-medicine medicine for a number of things. Just for individuals interested in improving their health and helping with ongoing disease processes. It's something that, as far as side effects, I haven't seen any. It's just berry juice, so not really concerned about significant side effects, but the benefits I find impressive. Okay. Any questions?
Awesome.
All right.